Before you scroll past this, stay with me for just a moment. If you are watching this tonight, there is a good chance you're carrying something that most of the people around you think you should have set down a long time ago. Someone is gone, and the world has quietly decided that you ought to be over it by now. The cards stopped coming. The phone calls thinned out. People who once lowered their voices and asked how you were really doing now just smile and say it is good to see you and move on to the next thing. And meanwhile, inside you, in a place no one can see, it is still so loud. The chair is still empty. The name still catches in your throat. And you have started to wonder if there is something wrong with you, because everyone else seems to have moved on, and you simply have not. I want you to know something right at the start. You did not find this by accident. Maybe you are lying awake again. Maybe it is late, and the house is quiet in that particular way it has been quiet since they left, and you could not say out loud to anyone what you are feeling. So you went looking for something, anything, in the dark. However you got here, you are here now, and I am glad. So do not leave just yet. Stay with me for this hour, because what we are going to do together is not going to rush you. No one here is going to tell you to cheer up, or to count your blessings, or to remember they are in a better place as though that should close the subject. We are going to sit in the truth of what you are carrying, the real weight of it. And then we are going to look at what God Himself does with grief, in His own words, and in the lives of real people who have walked the very road you are walking, and who are still standing. Let me start by simply telling you what I think your days have actually been like, because you have probably had enough of people who skip the hard part. I think the hardest moment was not the funeral. The funeral, somehow, you got through, because there were things to do and people to receive, and a kind of terrible momentum that carried you. I think the hardest moment came later, after the casseroles stopped, after the last relative drove away and the house went silent. I think it came on an ordinary Tuesday, weeks or months later, when the rest of the world had folded its grief up and put it away, and you were left standing in a kitchen that was suddenly too quiet, realizing that for everyone else, this was already a thing that happened, and for you, it is still happening, every single morning. The moment you wake up and remember all over again. I think there are small things that ambush you. A song on the radio you have to turn off. Their handwriting on a note you find in a drawer. A voicemail you cannot bring yourself to delete, that you play sometimes just to hear the voice. The way you still, even now, after all this time, reach for the phone to tell them something before you remember. That half second before you remember is its own small death, and it happens again and again. And no one warned you that grief would make you bury them 100 times. I think there is a particular loneliness to it, because grief that goes on past the time people expect is a grief you learn to hide. You have become an expert at the brief, acceptable answer. You say you are doing okay. You say you are getting there. You have learned that if you tell the truth, that you are not getting there, that some days you can barely breathe, people get uncomfortable. And so to spare them, and to spare yourself the look on their faces, you carry it alone. You have become very good at looking like a person who is healed, and I think there is a guilt that surprised you. The first time you laughed again, really laughed, and then felt a stab of shame, as though joy were a betrayal. Or the opposite guilt, the one that whispers, you did not do enough, you did not say enough, you are not there enough, the endless, cruel rehearsal of what you might have done differently. Grief almost always drags guilt in behind it, and the guilt lies, and it lies in the voice of love, which is what makes it so hard to argue with. And underneath all of it, I think there is the sheer size of the absence. Because you did not just lose a person, you lost a future. You lost all the conversations you were going to have, the holidays that will now have an empty seat, the milestones they will not be at, the version of your life that had them in it. People talk about losing someone as a single event, but you know the truth, which is that you lose them again at every birthday, every anniversary, every ordinary moment you would have shared for the rest of your life. It is not one loss, it is 1,000 small ones strung out across all the years they will not be here for. And there are the days that announce themselves from a long way off. The first birthday without them, the first holiday with the table set for one less, the anniversary of the day they died, which somehow your body remembers even when your mind tries not to, so that you find yourself heavy and raw for days before the date even arrives, grieving on a kind of schedule you never agreed to. The world treats these as ordinary squares on a calendar. For you, they are landmines, and you walk toward them every year knowing they are coming and never quite able to brace for the blast. And there are the things people said, because people, meaning well, say the most wounding things to the grieving. At least they lived a long life. At least you had the time you had. They are in a better place. Everything happens for a reason. And you nodded, and you thanked them, because you knew they meant well. And then you went home, and the words sat in your chest like stones, because none of them touched the actual thing, which is that the person you love is gone, and you would give anything for 5 more minutes. You did not need an explanation for your loss. You needed someone to honor it. And so few people seem to know the difference. And there is the loss of yourself. Because grief does not only take the person, it takes the part of you that existed in relation to them. The wife who was a wife for 40 years does not only lose her husband, she loses the person she was beside him, and wakes up not knowing who she is now, in a bed that is suddenly too big. The parent who loses a child loses a piece of their own future, their own identity as that child's mother or father in the world. You look in the mirror, and you do not quite recognize the person looking back, because so much of who you were was bound up in who they were to you. That disorientation is real. That is not you losing your mind. That is grief reshaping the entire landscape of your life. And it takes time, so much time, to learn the new ground. And then there is the grief that is more complicated than the simple stories allow. Because not every relationship was an easy one. Some of you are grieving someone the relationship with whom was hard or unfinished, full of things never said and never resolved. And your grief is tangled up with anger or regret, or a strange guilt that you are not grieving in the clean, simple way you think you are supposed to. Hear this. That grief is real too. The complicated losses are sometimes the heaviest of all, because you are mourning not only the person, but the relationship you never got to have, the apology that never came, the conversation that will now never happen. God sees that tangled grief just as clearly as the simple kind, and there is no wrong way for your particular loss to hurt. And underneath all of it, your body is carrying this too. Grief is not only an emotion, it lives in the body. The bone-deep exhaustion that sleep does not fix, the fog that makes you forget why you walked into a room, or lose the thread of a sentence halfway through saying it, the appetite that vanished, or the way food simply lost its taste, the strange aches that have no other explanation. No one warns you that mourning is physical, that it will wear your body down like an illness. And so you add yet another worry on top, wondering what is wrong with you, when the real answer is simply that you are grieving. And grief takes its toll on the whole person, body and mind and soul all at once. And there is the way grief slowly empties the room around you. In the first days, people came. There were so many of them it was almost too much. And then, the way a tide goes out, they receded, one by one, back into their own lives, which is natural and not their fault, but which leaves you standing on a suddenly empty shore. The friends who do not know what to say, and so say nothing, and then stay away because the not knowing makes them uncomfortable. The people who change the subject when their name comes up, afraid of upsetting you, not understanding that you think about them every hour anyway, and would give almost anything just to hear someone else say their name out loud. You learn that grief is a country other people are afraid to visit. They will wave at you from the border. Only a few will come all the way in and sit down with you. And so a loss that began as one thing, the loss of the person, slowly becomes two. Because on top of them, you lose the ordinary company of people who simply do not know how to be near so much sorrow. And here is the cruelest turn of it. Often, you end up being the one who comforts everyone else. At the funeral, you found yourself reassuring the other mourners, telling them it would be okay, holding them while they cried, because somehow you were the strong one, the one it was actually happening to. People marveled at how well you were holding up, never knowing that holding up was simply the only thing left to do with your hands. And you have kept doing it ever since. You manage other people's discomfort with your grief. You reassure them that you are fine, so they do not have to feel helpless. You have become the caretaker of a loss that is happening to you, and no one is taking care of you, because you have hidden the need so well. I want to name that, because no one else may have. It is an exhausting and lonely way to carry sorrow, performing wellness for the comfort of others, while the real grief goes underground and grows heavier in the dark. And it is one more reason the world believes you are over it, because you have worked so hard to let them believe it. But you are not fooling the one who keeps your tears in a bottle. He sees behind the brave face. He knows the difference between the okay you say out loud and the truth you carry home alone. And in his presence, at least, you do not have to perform. You can set the brave face down. You can stop being strong for one single hour. You can be exactly as broken as you actually are. And you will not be too much for him, and he will not back away toward the border. He comes all the way in. He sits all the way down. He stays. If any of that is close to true, then hear this plainly. Before we go one step further, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not weak. You are not stuck. You are not failing at grief. The fact that it still hurts this much is not a defect. It is the shape of how much you loved. Grief is not a problem to be solved, or a wound that should have scabbed over by some date on a calendar. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and the reason it is so heavy is that the love was so real. You are not broken for still carrying it. You would be far stranger if you did not. So let us not rush it tonight. Let us bring it into the open, where it can be seen, and where, maybe, for an hour, you do not have to carry it alone. Let me say one more true thing before we go on, because I do not want to leave it unsaid. There is a particular lie that gets aimed at grieving people of faith, and it may be the cruelest one of all. It is the idea that if your faith were strong enough, you would not hurt like this. That a real believer would have peace by now. That all this sorrow is somehow evidence that you are not trusting God the way you should. And so, on top of the grief, you carry a second weight. The weight of feeling like your own broken heart is a kind of spiritual failure. Like you were letting God down by not being okay. I want to take that lie apart, very gently, because it has no business sitting on your shoulders. The truth is the exact opposite of what that lie says. The deepest faith and the deepest grief have always lived in the same heart, side by side, all through the scriptures. The people God loved most were not the people who felt the least. They were often the ones who wept the hardest. Grief is not the absence of faith. Grief is what love does when it loses. And faith does not delete that. It simply refuses to let you go through it alone. So if you have been quietly afraid that your tears are an offense to God, let me tell you what we are about to see together, plainly and in His own words. They are not. He is nearer to you in them than you have ever known. Now I want to take you to the most important thing I can show you tonight. I want to take you to a graveside, 2,000 years ago. And I want you to watch what God did when He was standing in front of the death of someone He loved. Because it is not what most people expect, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it, and it changes everything about where God is right now, tonight, in your sorrow. There was a man named Lazarus, and he had 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, and the 3 of them were dear friends of Jesus. He stayed in their home. He loved them. And one day, Lazarus fell sick, seriously sick, and the sisters sent word to Jesus, the way you send word to the one person you believe can fix it. "Come, hurry, the one you love is sick." It is the most human message there is. You have probably sent some version of it yourself, in a prayer in the middle of the night. In a hospital hallway. "Come, please, do something." And here is the part of the story we do not like. Jesus did not hurry. He stayed where He was for 2 more days, and by the time He finally came, Lazarus was dead. Not just dead, he had been in the tomb 4 days already. The waiting was over. The worst had happened. The thing the sisters had been praying would not happen, happened, while they waited for a Jesus who did not come in time. And when He finally arrived, Martha went out to meet Him, and the first thing out of her mouth was not a greeting. It was the raw, honest, almost accusing cry of a grieving heart. She said, "Lord, if Thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. If You had been here, where were You? Why did You not come?" And a little while later, her sister Mary came and fell at His feet and said the exact same words. "Lord, if Thou hadst been here, my brother had not died." I want you to notice something, and I want you to hold on to it, because it matters for you tonight. Neither of those sisters got in trouble for saying that. Jesus did not rebuke them. He did not tell them their faith was too small or that they should not question Him. He let them say the hardest, most honest, almost angry thing a grieving person can say. The "Where were you?" The "Why did you not stop this?" And He received it. So if you have said those words, or only thought them, if some part of you is angry at God for not stopping what happened, hear this. You are standing exactly where Martha and Mary stood, and He did not turn them away, and He will not turn you away either. Your honest grief is safe with him. And then comes the moment. Jesus, standing there among the weeping people, looking at the tomb of his friend. And remember, this is the part that should stop you cold. Jesus knew. He knew what he was about to do. He knew that within minutes he was going to call Lazarus out of that grave alive. The happy ending was not in doubt to him. He had the resurrection in his pocket, so to speak. And knowing all of that, knowing the joy that was seconds away, the scripture tells us that he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And then comes the shortest verse in the entire Bible. 2 words, and they may be the 2 most important words a grieving person will ever read. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. The Son of God, who had every reason not to, who knew this story was about to turn, stood at the grave of someone he loved, and he cried. He did not stand at a distance and tell everyone to dry their eyes because it would all work out. He did not rush past the sorrow to get to the miracle. He entered the sorrow. He let it move him. He wept with the people who were weeping. And the ones standing nearby looked at him crying and said, "Behold how he loved him." They knew what the tears meant. The tears were love. I need you to sit with this, because I think it may be the most healing thing in this entire hour. The God you may have feared was disappointed in your tears is the God who wept. The God you may have imagined standing over your grief, tapping his foot, waiting for you to get it together, is the God who, standing at a grave, with the power to undo death in his very hands, chose first to cry. He does not despise your weeping. He shares it. When you sit in the empty room and the tears come and you feel ashamed of how undone you are, he is not above you, embarrassed. He is beside you, with wet eyes of his own. The shortest verse in the Bible exists so that no grieving person ever again would have to wonder whether God understands. He does. He has stood where you are standing. He has wept where you are weeping. And then, only after the tears, he moved toward the hope. He had them roll the stone away, and he called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth!" And the dead man came out, alive. But notice the order. Notice it carefully, because the world gets it backwards. The world tries to use the hope to cancel the grief. It says, "Do not cry because of the resurrection." But Jesus did not do that. Jesus wept first and raised him second. He honored the sorrow before he delivered the joy. The hope did not erase the tears. It came after them and through them. And that tells you something about how God means to walk you through your own grief. He is not going to shame you out of your sorrow on the way to comforting you. He is going to weep with you first, and then, in his time, he is going to speak hope over the very place that looks like nothing but a sealed and silent tomb. Let me take you to one more grave, even older than that one, because it belongs to a man who lost more than almost anyone, and because what God did and did not say to him will matter to you if anyone has ever handed you a tidy explanation for your loss. His name was Job. He was a good man, a man who loved God and did right, and in the space of a single day, almost everything was taken from him. His wealth gone, his health soon after, and worst of all, unthinkably, all 10 of his children taken in one disaster on the same afternoon. Not one, all of them. If you have ever wondered whether anyone in the scriptures could possibly understand the kind of loss that does not come one at a time, but all at once, like a wave that takes everything, it is Job. And here is what he did first. He tore his robe, and he shaved his head, which were the old ways of showing grief, with the whole body. And he fell down on the ground. He did not stand there calm and composed. He collapsed. And from the ground, broken, he said something that people quote all the time without realizing how much agony was behind it. He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Now, hear me carefully, because this gets so often misused. Those were not the words of a man who did not feel it. They were the words of a man flat on the ground, shaved and torn, in the worst hour of his life, somehow still reaching through the wreckage for the only one who could hold him. That is not the absence of grief. That is grief and faith in the very same breath. Exactly what we have been saying all along. But here is what most people do not know about Job, because we only ever quote that one verse. That verse is day 1. After it, Job spent chapter after chapter after chapter pouring out the rawest grief in the entire Bible. He cursed the day he was born. He said he wished he had never existed. He demanded answers from God. He argued. He accused. He wept and questioned and lamented for what reads like a very long time. And God let him. God did not strike him down for it. God did not tell him his grief was too loud or his questions were out of line. The book of Job is, in large part, simply the record of a devastated man being allowed to grieve out loud, honestly, messily, for as long as he needed to, in the presence of a God who could take it. And then there were his friends, and what happened with them may be the most important part of the whole story for you tonight. When they first heard what had happened, 3 of his friends came to be with him, and when they saw him, they barely recognized him. He was so broken. And they did one thing right, something so right that I wish more people knew how to do it. They sat down with him on the ground, and they stayed there beside him 7 days and 7 nights, and they did not say a single word, because they saw, the scripture says, that his grief was very great. 7 days of just being there, no speeches, no explanations, no fixing, just presence in the dust beside their broken friend. That was the best thing they ever did for him. And they did it with their mouths shut. And then they opened their mouths. And they ruined it. Because once they started talking, they could not stop explaining. They told Job there must be a reason. They suggested he must have done something to deserve it. They handed him neat little theories about why his children were dead. Tidy answers that tied his agony up in a bow and made it make sense to them. And every word made it worse. And at the very end of the book, when God himself finally speaks, here is the part you need to hear. God is not angry at Job for his grief, or his questions, or his raw and even bitter words. God is angry at the friends, at the ones with the tidy explanations, at the ones who could not simply sit in the sorrow, but had to make it neat. I tell you this because someone has probably done it to you. Someone, meaning well, has handed you one of those tidy explanations. At least they are not suffering anymore. Everything happens for a reason. God needed another angel. You are so strong. He only gives the hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. And every one of those lines, however kindly meant, landed like a small stone, because it tried to make sense of a thing that does not make sense, and it left you a little more alone than before. If that has happened to you, hear what the book of Job is quietly telling you. God is not on the side of the tidy explanations. He never was. He is on the side of the one on the ground. He would rather you bring him your honest, unanswerable grief than accept some neat little reason that papers over the wound. And the best thing anyone can ever do for a grieving person is almost never to explain. It is simply to sit down in the dust beside them and stay. If you have been wounded by people who talked when they should have just stayed, that wound is real, and God saw it, and He was angry on your behalf. Let me step out of the story for just a moment. If this is reaching something in you tonight, if it helps even a little to know you are not as alone in this as you have felt, I would gently say this. There are many people watching who are carrying a loss of their own right now. If you want to, you can write the name of the person you are grieving in the comments below, just their name, so that the rest of us can see it and honor it and pray for you. You do not have to. There is no magic in it. It is only that a name spoken in the company of people who understand is a small act of refusing to let your person be forgotten. And there is a quiet comfort in that. And if this has been a companion to you in a hard hour, you are welcome to follow along, so it can find you again on the next difficult night. That is all. Now let me keep going, because the oldest story is not the only true one I want to give you. There are people living in our own time who have stood at the grave the world expected them to walk away from, and who can tell you, from the far side of years, what the road actually looks like. Let me tell you about a man named Zig Ziglar. For most of his life, Zig was known as one of the most relentlessly hopeful men alive. He was a speaker, a man whose entire reputation was built on encouragement and optimism. The last man on earth you would expect to be flattened by anything. And then his grown daughter died. And all the optimism in the world does not make a parent able to outrun that. He has spoken openly about it, and what he said is worth more than any tidy slogan, because it came out of the real thing. He did not pretend it did not nearly destroy him. He did not stand up and say that because he had faith, the loss did not hurt. He let it be what it was, which was devastating. But he also described something that I want you to hear, because it is a picture of how grief and hope can live in the same heart without one canceling the other. He said it was as though God held a pair of scales. On the one side was the unbearable weight of the grief, the sheer crushing loss of his child. He never denied that weight or pretended it was lighter than it was. But on the other side of the scale, God set down the assurance that this was not the end, that he would see her again, and that assurance did not remove the grief. It balanced it. It kept the grief from being the only thing on the scale. He could hold the sorrow and the hope at the same time, and the hope was enough to keep the sorrow from swallowing him whole. And he said something else that matters, especially if you are afraid of what this loss might do to the people around you. He pointed out that a staggering number of marriages do not survive the death of a child. The grief is so heavy and so isolating that many couples drift into separate corners of their pain and never find their way back to each other. But that was not his story. He and his wife, in the middle of the worst thing that had ever happened to them, turned toward each other instead of away. They let the grief be a thing they carried together, rather than two things they carried alone. And he said that he came to love his wife more, not less, on the far side of that valley. Their love did not break under the weight. It deepened. I tell you his story because of two things it quietly proves. The first is that grief is not the enemy of a strong faith or a hopeful life. Here was one of the most hopeful men who ever lived, and he wept, and he grieved. And his hope did not make him weep less. It simply gave him somewhere to stand while he wept. And the second is that grief, carried with God and carried with the people who love you, does not have to be the thing that destroys you. It can, against everything you would expect, become a place where love grows deeper. He called the dark journey of grief a road, not a pit, not a dead end, a road. A road that, walked all the way through, actually leads somewhere, and that somewhere is healing. Not forgetting, not getting over it. Healing, which is a different and gentler thing entirely. And let me tell you, more briefly, about one more family, because some of you are carrying not one loss, but many, and I do not want you to feel unseen. There was a family, the Evans family, who across their life together walked through the loss of 8 of their loved ones. 8, including the grandmother who had been the very heart of them, the one who held everyone together. Imagine that. Imagine grief not as a single blow, but as a series of them, one after another. The funerals barely finished before the next began. Some of you know exactly what that is, because you are living it. You have lost more than one. You have barely begun to grieve one person before another was taken, and the losses have stacked up until you can hardly tell where one sorrow ends and the next begins. And what that family came to know, and what I want you to hear, is that even a heart that has been broken that many times is not beyond the reach of God's comfort. He does not run out. There is no number of losses at which he finally turns away and says, "You are on your own now." The God who is near the brokenhearted is near to the heart that has been broken once, and just as near to the heart that has been broken 8 times, and as near to yours tonight as he has ever been to anyone. So let me bring these together, the ancient story and the modern ones. A Savior who wept at the grave of his friend, a hopeful man flattened by the death of his daughter, who found that hope did not cancel his grief but balanced it. A family who walked through loss after loss after loss and were not abandoned in any of them. Different centuries, different sorrows, the very same truth running underneath all of them. God does not stand outside of human grief. He enters it. He weeps in it. He stays in it. And he is in yours, right now, tonight, whether or not you can feel him through the fog. Before we turn to the scriptures directly, let me give you 2 more true pictures from them, because each one answers a question that grieving hearts ask in the dark. The first is about a king named David, and it answers the question, will I ever see them again? David had a baby son who fell gravely ill, and while the child was still alive, David did everything a desperate parent does. He fasted, he wept, he lay all night on the ground, pleading with God to spare his son. He held nothing back, because while there was still life, there was still room to beg heaven for a miracle. And then the child died. And David's servants were afraid even to tell him, because they thought, if he grieved this hard while the boy was sick, the news of his death might break him completely. But when David learned his son was gone, he did something that confused everyone around him. He got up off the ground. he washed, he worshipped, and then he ate. And his servants asked him, "What is this? You wept and fasted while he lived, and now that he is dead, you rise and eat?" And David gave an answer that has comforted grieving believers ever since. He said, "While the child was alive, I fasted and wept. For I thought, who can tell? Maybe God will be gracious and let him live. But now he is dead. Can I bring him back again?" And then the line, "I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. I shall go to him." David was not saying his child had simply vanished into nothing. He was saying there is a reunion ahead. He will not come back to me here, in this life, but I am going where he is. The road only runs one direction, but it does run there. That quiet hope, "I shall go to him," has held more grieving parents upright than almost any other sentence in the scriptures. Because it does not pretend the loss away. It simply refuses to believe that the loss is the end of the road. The second picture is about a moment when Jesus walked into a town and met a funeral. He was coming up toward the gate of a village, and out through that gate was being carried the body of a young man, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Stop and feel the full weight of that, the way the people of that time would have felt it. She had already lost her husband, and now her only son, who would have been her last protection, her provision, her one remaining family in the world, was dead too. She was, in that moment, as alone and undone as a human being can be, walking behind the body of the last person she had. And there was a large crowd with her. But a crowd does not fill the hole that grief leaves. And here is what Jesus did. The scripture says that when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. He saw her in the middle of a crowd, on a busy road, with everything else going on. He saw the one grieving woman the world would have walked right past, and his heart broke for her. And the first thing he said to her was two gentle words, "Weep not." And then he went and touched the funeral bier, and he spoke to the dead young man and said, "Arise." And the young man sat up and began to speak. And the scripture says, in a line that should undo you, that Jesus gave him back to his mother. He gave him back. He did not just perform a miracle in front of a crowd. He restored a son to the arms of a grieving mother who had no one left. I tell you that story because of who Jesus is in it. He is the one who notices the griever everyone else overlooks. He is the one whose first instinct is not to explain or to correct, but to have compassion, to feel it with you. This is the same person the scriptures call a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, acquainted with it, not a stranger to it, observing your pain from a safe distance, but intimate with it, on a first-name basis with sorrow, having walked through it himself. The God you are grieving in front of tonight is not a God who has never wept. He is the man of sorrows, and he knows the exact shape of the weight on your chest, and he sees you in the crowd, the way he saw that widow at the gate, and his heart breaks for you too. Now I want to show you what the scriptures actually say to the grieving, because everything I have told you rests on it, and these are not my words, they are his, and you deserve to hear them straight. There is a line in the Psalms, written by a man who knew more than his share of loss, and it says simply that the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and that he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Hear what that says. And hear what it does not say. It does not say, "The Lord is near to those who have pulled themselves together." It does not say, "He shows up once you have stopped crying and started smiling again." It says the opposite. It says the broken heart is the very thing that draws him near. The crushed spirit is not what pushes God away. It is what he moves toward. So if you feel broken tonight, if you feel crushed, you are not in the place where God is distant. By his own word, you are in the exact place where he is nearest. And the same songbook gives us an image so tender it is almost hard to believe it is in there. One of the writers, in the middle of his own sorrow and fear, said to God, "You keep track of all my wanderings." And then he asked God to do something with his tears. He said, "Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book?" In the ancient world, there was a custom among grieving people of catching their tears in a small bottle, a tear bottle, and keeping it, because the tears shed over someone you loved were considered precious, too precious to simply let fall into the dust and disappear. And this grieving man looked up at God and said, "You do that. You catch my tears. You keep them in your bottle. You write every one of them in your book." Sit with what that says about the God you are weeping in front of tonight. Your tears are not falling into nothing. They are not wasted. They are not invisible to heaven. Every single one of them, the ones that fall at the kitchen table at midnight, the ones that come out of nowhere in the grocery aisle, the ones you cry into your pillow so no one will hear, the ones you have shed alone for months that no other living person even knows about. God has caught every one. He keeps them. He counts them. He writes them down. Not one of your tears has ever hit the ground unnoticed. The world may have lost count of your grief a long time ago. God never started losing count. Every tear you have cried over the one you lost is held, right now, in the hands of a God who considered it too precious to let it fall and be forgotten. So, if you have ever felt that your grief is pointless, that all this crying accomplishes nothing, that the tears are just weakness leaking out of you, hear this. To God, your tears are precious enough to collect. He treats the evidence of your love and your loss the way you would treat something irreplaceable. Your sorrow matters to him down to the last tear. And a God who keeps your tears in a bottle is not a God who is ever going to forget you, or your loss, or the one you are weeping for. Jesus himself said, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." Sit with how strange and how kind that is. He did not say, "Blessed are those who never lose anyone." He did not say, "Blessed are those who get over it quickly." He called the mourners blessed. He put the grieving in the same breath as the blessed. In the kingdom of God, your mourning is not a disqualification or a weakness. It is named, and it is honored, and it carries a promise attached to it, that those who mourn will be comforted. Not that they should not mourn, that they will be comforted as they mourn. There is the old shepherd's song, the one read at so many gravesides that we forget how strong it is, where the writer says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Notice the small words that carry the whole weight. Through. He says, through the valley, not into it and stuck there forever. It is a valley you are walking through, even when it does not feel like you are moving at all. And with, for thou art with me. The promise is not that you get to skip the valley. The promise is that you do not walk it alone. The shadow is real. The darkness is real. and so is the one walking beside you in it. The Apostle Paul wrote to a church full of people who were grieving those they had lost, and he told them something careful and precise. And I want you to catch exactly what he said and exactly what he did not say. He told them not to grieve as those who have no hope. Read that slowly. He did not tell them not to grieve. He assumed they would grieve. He told them to grieve differently, to grieve with hope mixed in. There is a grief that has no floor under it, that falls and falls into nothing. The grief of believing this is simply the end, and there is nothing more. And then there is the grief of the believer, which is just as real, just as wet with tears, but which has a floor under it, a hope holding it up. You are allowed to grieve. You are commanded only not to grieve as one with no hope at all. The tears are permitted. The hope is added underneath them. And the same Paul called God the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, the one who comforts us in all our trouble. And then he added a reason that may surprise you. He said, God comforts us so that we may be able to comfort others with the comfort we ourselves have received. Which means the comfort God is pouring into your broken heart, slowly, over this long season, is not only for you. There is a day coming, further down the road than you can see right now, when you will sit beside someone else who has just had their world torn open, and you will know what to say, and how to be quiet, and how to simply stay, because you have been here. Your grief, in His hands, becomes a strange kind of gift you will one day be able to give. The comfort does not stop with you, it flows through you. And then, near the very end of the Bible, there is the promise that all of this is moving toward, and it is worth more than every easy thing anyone has ever said at a funeral. It says that God Himself shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and that there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Notice who does the wiping. Not you, not time, God Himself. He bends down, personally, and wipes the tears from the faces of His children. And notice what is promised. Not that the tears never were, but that they will be wiped away, and that the whole machinery of death and sorrow and crying and pain, the machinery that has ground you down this year, will be permanently, finally, shut off. The empty chair is not the last word. The silent phone is not the end of the story. There is a morning coming with no funerals in it. And I want to stay on that hope for just a moment longer, because it is the thing the world cannot give you, and the thing your heart most needs to hear. Every single time Jesus came face to face with death during His life on earth, death lost. He stood at the tomb of His friend Lazarus and called him out, and the grave gave him back. He stopped a funeral at the gate of a town and handed a dead son back to his mother, alive. He took the cold hand of a little girl everyone said was gone and told her to get up. And she did. Death had never lost an argument before He came, and after He came, it never won another one for keeps. And then He did the thing that settled it forever. He walked into death Himself, all the way in, into a sealed tomb of His own. And on the third day, He walked back out. And in doing it, He broke the one thing that has terrified every human being who ever lived. He turned death, for those who are His, from a wall into a door. That is why David could say, "I shall go to him." That is why the apostle could tell a grieving church not to sorrow as those who have no hope. Not because the sorrow is not real, but because, for the believer, the goodbye at the graveside is not the final word. It is, as hard as this is to feel right now, far more like, "I will see you later," than like, "Goodbye forever." The separation is real, and it is brutal, and you are allowed to ache under it for as long as you ache. But it is a separation with an ending written into it. There is a reunion in the back of the book. The God who gave a son back to a widow at a gate, and a brother back to two sisters at a tomb, has promised that a day is coming when he will give back everything that death has taken from his children, and wipe the last tear from every eye, and shut the door on death so that it never takes anyone again. That is not wishful thinking. That is the word of the one who has already walked out of his own grave. Now, before we go on, I want to speak to something a lot of grieving people carry in secret, and are ashamed of, and so never say out loud. Some of you are angry. Angry at God. You prayed, and the answer was no. You begged him to spare them, to heal them, to send the miracle. And the miracle did not come. And they died anyway. And somewhere underneath your sorrow, there is a hot, frightening anger that you are not even sure you are allowed to feel. You sit in church and sing the songs, and you wonder if God can tell that a part of you is furious with him, and the guilt of that anger has become its own separate weight. Hear me, gently. You are allowed to be angry, and you are allowed to bring that anger straight to God, because the scriptures are absolutely full of people who did exactly that. Job did. He argued with God for chapters. David did, over and over, in the very songs we still sing. The Psalms are not all gentle and serene. Many of them are raw complaints flung up at heaven. "How long, O Lord? Why have you forgotten me? Where are you?" These are in the Bible. God put them there. He left them in his own book like a kind of permission slip, so that you would know that the door to him does not slam shut when your prayer turns into a protest. He is not fragile. Your anger does not threaten him. He would so much rather have you in the room, weeping and even shouting at him, than have you politely walk away because you decided your anger made you unwelcome. The opposite of faith is not anger. The opposite of faith is indifference, walking away, deciding he is not worth talking to anymore. As long as you are still bringing it to him, even the furious version of it, you are still in the relationship. Martha brought him her accusation, the "Where were you?" And he did not flinch, and he did not leave. He will not leave you either. And some of you are not so much angry as you are simply met with silence. You have prayed, and there has been no answer, no comfort, no sense of his presence at all, just a flat and empty quiet. And you have begun to wonder if anyone is there. I will not pretend that silence away, because it is one of the hardest parts of grief, and the easy answers people offer for it only make it worse. But I will tell you this. Remember that the sisters at the tomb felt that silence too. They sent for Jesus, and he did not come. And for 4 long days, it must have seemed like heaven had gone completely quiet, like their prayers had fallen on a God who was not listening, or was not there. And the whole time, he was already on his way. He was coming. He had not forgotten them, and he was not absent, even in the days when his silence felt exactly like abandonment. The silence was not the end of their story. It was the long, terrible middle of it, the part that comes before he arrives. You may be in the silent middle right now. That does not mean he is not coming. It does not mean he did not hear you. The God who seemed silent to Mary and Martha was, that entire time, walking toward their grief. And he is walking toward yours. Now let me name the lies grief has been telling you, because it has been whispering in your ear for a long time, and it is time someone answered it. The first lie is, you should be over this by now. You hear it in the way people have stopped asking. You hear it in your own head when you catch yourself crying again over something months or years old and think, what is wrong with me? But there is no clock on grief. There is no schedule. The idea that there is a proper amount of time after which you should be finished is a thing the world made up because the world is uncomfortable with sorrow that lasts. God put no such deadline on you. He is near to the brokenhearted, and that promise has no expiration date stamped on it. You are allowed to still be grieving. You are allowed to grieve for as long as you grieve. The second lie is that grieving this hard means your faith is weak. We already began to take this one apart, but hear it again, because grief will keep whispering it. Your tears are not the opposite of faith. Jesus wept, and no one had more faith than he did. The strength of your sorrow is a measure of the strength of your love, not the weakness of your belief. You can trust God completely and still be on your knees with grief. Both things are true at once. They have always been true at once. The third lie is the heaviest, and I want to handle it as gently as I can. It is the lie that says, the pain means they are simply gone, and that is the whole and final truth. And there is nothing underneath the loss but more loss forever. When the ache goes on and on, that lie gets loud. But everything we have looked at tonight stands against it. The God who wept at a grave also stood up and called a dead man out into the daylight. The one who shares your tears also promised a day with no more death in it. Your grief is real, achingly real, but it is not the floor of the universe. Underneath it, holding it up, is a hope older and stronger than death. That the goodbye you said was not, in the end, forever. I want to pause here and say something carefully, because some of you are carrying more than grief tonight. For some of you, the loss has been so total and the loneliness so deep that a part of you has begun to feel that you do not want to be here anymore, that it would be easier to stop, that the people left behind might even be better off. If that is where you are, I need you to hear me very clearly, with all the gentleness I have. That thought is the grief talking, and the grief is a liar in its darkest hour. And you do not have to believe it. And you must not be alone with it tonight. You are not a burden. The world is not better without you in it. Please, tell someone. Tonight, or first thing tomorrow. A pastor, a friend, a family member, a trusted voice on a helpline in your country. The God who wept at the grave of his friend is not ashamed of your pain, and he is not asking you to carry it by yourself in the dark. He put people in your life on purpose. Let one of them in. There is no depth of sorrow you could confess that would make you less worth saving than you are right now. Let me step out one more time, just briefly, and then we are going to land this gently. If you have stayed with me this far, thank you for trusting an hour of a hard night to this. If anything here has been a comfort, you are welcome to stay subscribed, so it can keep you company on the next hard evening. And you are always welcome to leave the name of the one you are grieving below, where others who understand can hold it with you. No one here will ever ask you for anything, just company, and the Word, and the nearness of the God who is close to the brokenhearted. Now let me put a few things gently into your hands, because comfort without a way forward can leave you right where it found you, and I do not want to do that to you. So here is what I would offer you, not as a way to hurry your grief, but as a way to walk it with God instead of alone. First, give yourself permission to grieve, with no timetable at all. Stop measuring yourself against the calendar or against other people's comfort. You will grieve for as long as you loved, which is to say, in some quiet way, always. And that is not a failure. It is faithfulness to a love that was real. Let the tears come when they come. Jesus wept, and you are allowed to weep too. Second, say their name, out loud. Do not let the fear of making others uncomfortable bury the person you loved in silence. Speak about them, tell the stories, keep the memory in the daylight where it belongs. Naming someone is not clinging to the past, it is honoring a life that mattered. The God who knows your person by name is not asking you to pretend they never were. Third, let people in, even now, even after they think the season has passed. Tell one safe person the truth, that you are not over it, that some days are still very hard. You are not built to grieve in isolation. And do the opposite too. When someone offers to sit with you, to bring a meal, to simply be there, let them. Receiving help is not weakness. It is how God most often sends His comfort, through the hands and the presence of other people. Fourth, bring God the honest prayer, even the angry one. Martha said it to His face, "If you had been here." You can too. You do not have to dress up your grief in polite, churchy words before you bring it to Him. He can handle the raw version. He would rather have your honest anguish than your polite distance. Tell Him exactly where it hurts, exactly what you do not understand, exactly how unfair it feels. That is not a lack of faith. That is faith, taking its sorrow to the only one strong enough to hold it. Fifth, take only the next small step, not the whole staircase of the rest of your life without them, just the next thing. Get up, eat something, take the walk, make the one phone call. Get through this one day, and when it is done, you will not have to get through it again. Grief makes the future look like an impossible mountain. You are not asked to climb the mountain today. You are only asked to take the next step on the road. And the one who walks the valley with you will be there for the step after that. And sixth, when you are ready, and not one moment before, let your sorrow begin to turn outward. There will come a day, further along than you can see now, when you meet someone whose world has just shattered the way yours did, and you will be able to sit with them in a way that no untouched person ever could. Your grief will have made you fluent in a language of comfort that cannot be learned any other way. That is the strange mercy in it. The comfort you are receiving now, drop by drop, is being stored up in you. And one day, it will pour out for someone who needs exactly what you have learned to survive. Seventh, do not let the hard dates ambush you alone. The birthday, the anniversary, the holiday with the empty chair, the day they died. These are coming whether you brace for them or not. So instead of dreading them in isolation, plan for them. Tell someone the date is coming and ask them to be near you for it. Make a small, deliberate act of remembrance, something that is yours. Light a candle, cook the meal they loved, visit the place. Look at the photographs and say their name out loud, and let yourself feel all of it. Grief that is given a place to go on the hard days is so much gentler than grief that ambushes you because you tried to pretend the date was ordinary. You are allowed to mark them. You are allowed to remember on purpose. And eighth, be patient with your body. Grief is not only happening in your heart, it is happening in your bones. So when you are exhausted in a way that does not make sense, rest, and do not call it weakness. When food has lost its taste, eat anyway, gently, because your body still needs to be cared for even when you do not feel like caring for it. When your mind fogs and you forget things and you cannot concentrate, forgive yourself. Because a grieving brain is doing enormous, invisible work and has little left over for remembering where you put your keys. Treat your grieving body the way you would treat the body of someone recovering from a serious illness, with patience and tenderness and no scolding. Because in a very real way, that is exactly what you are. The God who made your body knows that it is grieving, and He is not asking you to perform. He is asking you to let yourself heal, at the pace that healing actually takes. And let me say one more thing, the gentlest thing I know how to say about any of this. Your grief is the price of your love. The reason it hurts this much is that you loved this much. And if you could go back, knowing the pain that the ending would cost you, almost none of us would choose to unlove them in order to be spared the grief. The grief and the love are the same thing, seen from two different sides, which means that as long as you carry the grief, you are also still carrying the love. And the love did not die when the person did. It only changed shape. It became memory and longing and the ache of missing them. And one day, further along the road than you can see right now, it becomes gratitude that you got to love them at all. So do not be in a hurry to be rid of your grief, as though it were only pain to be deleted. Hidden inside it is the love, and the love is worth keeping, even at this cost. The goal was never to stop loving them. The goal is to learn, slowly, with God's help, to carry that love in a way you can live with, and even, someday, give thanks for. Now let me leave you with a blessing, and then I will let you rest, because you are so tired, and rest is one of the gentlest gifts God gives His grieving children. May you remember tonight that the God who stood at the grave of His friend and wept is standing in your empty room with you, and that your tears do not embarrass Him, because they are His tears too. May you remember that He is not far from you in your sorrow, but nearest to you in it, because He has promised to be close to the brokenhearted, and He does not break His promises. May the lie that says you should be over this by now, that your grief is weakness, that the goodbye was forever, fall silent in the light of the one who called a dead man out of the dark and who has promised a morning with no more death in it. May you grieve without shame and without a clock and without being alone. May you say their name and keep them in the daylight. May you bring God the honest, unpolished, even angry prayer and find that He receives it the way He received it from Martha at the grave. And may you come to know the way Zig Ziglar came to know, the way that family who lost so many came to know, the way Mary and Martha came to know when their brother walked back into the light. That this sorrow, as real and as heavy as it is not the floor of the universe, and that underneath it, holding you up, are the everlasting arms of the God of all comfort, who is wiping away tears even now, and who will one day wipe away the last of them forever. and may you give yourself the same patience God is already showing you. You do not have to be healed by mourning. You do not have to find the right words, or the strong faith, or the dry eyes. You are allowed to take this one slow day at a time. To cry when the tears come, and laugh when the laughter comes, and feel guilty about neither. You are allowed to carry the one you love with you into all the years ahead, not as a wound that has to be hidden, but as a love that shaped you and is shaping you still. Healing, when it comes, and it will come, will not mean you stopped loving them or left them behind. It will mean you learned to carry the love without being crushed beneath it. And that is something God Himself will teach you, gently, over time, if you let Him walk it with you. The world may expect you to be over it, but you are not behind, and you are not broken, and you are not alone at that empty chair. The one who weeps with you is going to walk you all the way through this valley and out the other side in His time, and He is not going to let go of your hand. Rest now, and come back when the night is long. There will always be a light on here, and a word from the God who is near to the brokenhearted, and a place for you, and for the memory of the one you love. Good night, friend. You are going to make it through this, not because it stops hurting all at once, but because you are not carrying it alone. And the one carrying it with you has already beaten the very thing that took them. And he is not going to lose you in the dark.